This is the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Unter anderem revolutionär.
Ja, besseren Verkehrs. Offen auf der Ausschuss.
Ist mal allerdings besonders.
Welcome, my precious children, to your Aunt Betty's attic. Look around and ask questions. For in this space is all my tricks and remedies that my parents taught me. I was brought up on a farm, and if we needed something, we didn't have money, so we built it. I want to share some of that knowledge with you. I was taught by people who suffered through the Great Depression. They knew how to survive. They knew how to mend wounds, and they knew what herbs did what. Plus, I want to talk about some of the new ideas out there. There is only one requirement. If you learn anything from this attic, you must teach others. Please promise your dear old Aunt Betty this.
Well, hello there, my precious children. Welcome back to Aunt Betty's attic, where the old ways meet the new world, and where we learn how to live better, love deeper, and think smarter. Now, pull up a chair, dust off that old trunk in the corner, and settle in. Because today, we're talking about something that's been slipping through the cracks of modern life: empathy. Yes, that little word that carries a big weight. And let me tell you, it's not just about feeling sorry for someone. It's about understanding, connecting, and sometimes, it's about saving the very fabric of our communities. Before we dive in, let me remind you of the promise you make every time you step into this attic. If you learn something here, you teach it to someone else. That's how we keep wisdom alive. That's how we build strong families and strong neighborhoods. So, promise me that right now. Say it out loud if you have to. I will teach what I learn. Good. Now, let's get started. Why empathy matters today. Empathy isn't just a nice word for Sunday sermons. It's a survival skill. And I don't say that lightly. In a world that feels more divided than ever, politics pulling us apart, social media turning neighbors into strangers, we need empathy like we need air. Without it, we're just ships passing in the night, honking our horns and never docking to help each other out. Think about it. When disaster strikes, whether it's a hurricane, a wildfire, or even a pandemic, what keeps people alive? It's not just canned goods and bottled water. It's people helping people. It's neighbors checking on neighbors. It's communities pulling together. And that starts with empathy. Aunt Betty's story, Lessons from Hard Times. Now, let me tell you a little story. Back in my day, yes, I'm going to say it, because I've earned these gray hairs, when the Great Depression hit, folks didn't have much. But you know what they did have? Each other. If your cow went dry, your neighbor brought you milk. If your roof leaked, someone showed up with a hammer. Nobody asked for payment. Nobody checked your politics. They just helped. Because empathy wasn't a buzzword, it was a way of life. And here's the kicker, we didn't call it empathy. We called it being decent. We called it being human. Somewhere along the way, we've lost that. And today, we're going to talk about how to get it back. What we'll cover today. So, here's what's coming up in this episode. First, we're going to break down what empathy really is, and what it isn't. Then, we'll talk about why it's harder to practice these days, and why that's dangerous for all of us. And finally, I'll give you 5 practical ways to build empathy into your daily life, starting today. No fluff, no nonsense, just real steps you can take. Empathy defined, Aunt Betty style. Empathy is not pity. Let me say that again for the folks in the back. Empathy is not pity. Pity looks down on people. Empathy stands beside them. It's about understanding someone else's feelings, even if you don't share their experience. It's about saying, I see you, I hear you, and I care. That's powerful stuff. But here's the truth, empathy is a skill. It's not something you're born with and stuck with. You can grow it. You can practice it. And yes, you can lose it if you're not careful. That's why we're here today, to make sure you don't lose it. Empathy in crisis situations. Let's talk preparedness for a second, because you know Aunt Betty loves her preparedness. When disaster hits, empathy becomes a lifeline. If you're hoarding supplies and ignoring your neighbor who's struggling, you're not just failing them, you're failing your community. Empathy means thinking beyond your own pantry. It means asking, who else needs help? That's how we survive together. Modern challenges to empathy. Now, I know what you're thinking, Aunt Betty, it's hard to care about people these days. Everyone's yelling on the internet. Everyone's angry. And you're right. The world feels loud and mean. But that's exactly why empathy matters more than ever. It's the antidote to outrage. It's the bridge over the divide. Psychologists like Jamil Zaki, smart fella over at Stanford, say empathy isn't fixed. It's like a muscle. You work it, it gets stronger. You ignore it, it withers. So, if you've been feeling like your empathy tank is running low, don't panic. You can refill it. And I'm going to show you how. Promise of practical steps. By the end of this episode, you'll have 5 solid strategies to boost your empathy. And no, they don't involve singing Kumbaya or hugging strangers in the grocery store. These are real, doable steps. Things you can start today, things you can teach your kids, things that will make your home, your street, and your town a better place. Closing the opening segment. So, grab your notebook, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's roll up our sleeves. Because empathy isn't just talk, it's action. And if you stick with me, you're going to walk out of this attic with tools that can change lives. Yours included. Well now, sugar, let me tell you something. Empathy isn't just a warm fuzzy feeling you pull out when you're watching a sad movie. No ma'am. It's the glue that holds society together. And if that glue dries up, everything starts cracking. Families, friendships, communities. You've seen it, haven't you? Folks arguing like cats in a sack over politics. Neighbors who won't even wave hello because they're too busy scrolling through their phones. Lord have mercy, we've traded front porch conversations for comment section brawls. And guess what? That's costing us more than we realize. Back in the day, we didn't have hashtags or trending topics. We had people. Real, flesh and blood people who showed up when you needed them. When my daddy's crop failed in 32, the neighbors didn't just send thoughts and prayers, they brought over sacks of flour and jars of beans. They didn't ask for a receipt. They didn't post about it for likes. They just did it because that's what decent folks do. That's empathy in action. Fast forward to today, and what do we have? Folks hoarding toilet paper like it's gold bullion, leaving shelves bare for families who really need it. Honey, if that's your idea of survival, you need to sit down and rethink your life choices. Empathy means thinking beyond your own pantry. It means asking, who else needs help? That's how we survive together. That's how we thrive. Why empathy feels harder now. Now, let's talk about why empathy feels like pulling teeth these days. First off, We're living in what I call the me era. Everything's about personal branding, curated feeds, and chasing validation from strangers. People are so busy polishing their online image, they've forgotten how to look someone in the eye and say, "How are you really doing?" And don't get me started on outrage culture. Lord, if outrage were a currency, half the internet would be billionaires. Social media has turned empathy into a performance. Folks will post a hashtag about caring, but when their neighbor's car breaks down, they're nowhere to be found. That's not empathy, sugar, that's theater. Real empathy doesn't need an audience. It's quiet. It's steady. It's showing up when nobody's watching. And here's another kicker, we've gotten so tribal. People only care about folks who look like them, vote like them, think like them. That's not empathy, that's favoritism dressed up in Sunday clothes. True empathy crosses lines. It says, I may not agree with you, but I still care about you. And let me tell you, that's hard work. It's easier to stay in your bubble and holler at the other side. But easy doesn't build bridges. Easy doesn't heal wounds. Empathy during hard times, stories that matter. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1943. The world's at war. My Uncle Joe was overseas, and back home, rationing was tighter than a tick on a hound. Sugar was scarce, coffee was a luxury, and shoes? Honey, you patched those soles until they looked like a quilt. But you know what folks did? They shared. If you had extra eggs, you swapped them for flour. If someone's boy was fighting in Europe, you checked on that mama every Sunday. You didn't wait for a government program. You didn't say, not my problem. You acted. That's empathy. Fast forward to Hurricane Andrew in '92. I remember seeing neighbors hauling debris together, cooking meals on camp stoves for families who lost everything. Nobody asked who voted for who. Nobody cared about bumper stickers. They cared about survival. They cared about each other. That's the kind of spirit we need to revive. The cost of losing empathy. Now, let me get real blunt, because you know Aunt Betty doesn't sugarcoat. When empathy dies, society rots. Crime goes up. Loneliness skyrockets. Mental health tanks. And don't think you're immune just because you've got a fancy alarm system and a freezer full of steaks. When communities crumble, everybody pays. You can't build a fortress high enough to keep out the consequences of indifference. And here's the sad truth, we're seeing it already. People are isolated. Families are fractured. Folks are more connected digitally than ever, but emotionally? They're starving. And sugar, you can't feed a hungry heart with emojis. Foreshadowing what's next. So here's what we're gonna do. In the next segment, I'm going to give you 5 practical ways to flex that empathy muscle. And no, they're not complicated. You don't need a PhD. You don't need a meditation app. You just need a willing heart and a little grit. Because empathy isn't about grand gestures. It's about small, consistent acts that say, I see you. I care. But for now, I want you to sit with this truth. Empathy is the backbone of resilience. Without it, we're just a bunch of individuals hoarding resources and pointing fingers. With it, we're a community, a force that can weather any storm. And honey, storms are coming. So let's get ready. Well now, sugar, if you've stuck with me this far, bless your heart, you're already ahead of half the world. Because most folks these days don't want to hear about empathy. They want quick fixes, instant gratification, and a magic app that makes them feel good without lifting a finger. But empathy? That takes effort. It takes time. And honey, it takes heart. And let me tell you, hearts are running on empty out there. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying people are bad. I'm saying people are tired. Worn down. Life's been throwing curveballs like a pitcher on payday. We've had pandemics, political chaos, economic roller coasters, and don't even get me started on the weather. Folks are stretched thin, and when you're running on fumes, empathy feels like a luxury. But sugar, it's not a luxury, it's a lifeline. The digital dilemma. Let's talk about these little glowing rectangles we all carry around. Phones, tablets, screens everywhere. They've connected us in ways my generation couldn't have imagined. But they've also built walls. Isn't that something? We've got more ways to talk than ever, and yet real conversation is dying. People text instead of talk. They post instead of listen. And empathy? Well, it doesn't thrive in a comment section, sugar. It needs eye contact. It needs tone of voice. It needs presence. And don't even get me started on algorithms. Lord have mercy, these tech giants have turned outrage into a business model. The angrier you are, the more you click. The more you click, the more they profit. So what happens? We're fed a steady diet of drama and division. And empathy? It starves. Because you can't feel for someone when you're too busy fighting them. Empathy and identity. Here's another hard truth. We've confused empathy with agreement. Folks think, if I empathize with you, I'm endorsing your choices. No, sugar. Empathy doesn't mean you sign off on everything someone does. It means you recognize their humanity. It means you understand their feelings, even if you don't share their beliefs. That's grown-up thinking. And Lord knows we need more grown-ups in the room. Take politics, for example. People treat it like a blood sport. Red versus blue, left versus right, like it's the Super Bowl and the loser gets banished to Mars. Honey, that's nonsense. Politicians work for us, not the other way around. And if we can't empathize with our neighbors because of a yard sign, we've lost the plot. Empathy says, I may not agree with your vote, but I still care if your roof leaks. That's the kind of thinking that keeps communities strong. Stories that stick. Let me tell you about Miss Clara. She lived 2 doors down from me back in the 70s. Sweet woman, but Lord, she was stubborn as a mule and had opinions that could curl your hair. We didn't agree on much. Politics, religion, you name it. But when her husband passed, I was the first one on her porch with a casserole and a hug. Because grief doesn't care about party lines. And empathy? It shows up when life gets hard, not when it's convenient. And you know what happened? That casserole turned into conversations. Those conversations turned into understanding. We didn't change each other's minds, but we changed each other's hearts. And sugar, that's worth more than winning an argument. The ripple effect. Here's the beautiful thing about empathy. It spreads. Like ripples in a pond. One act of kindness inspires another. One listening ear opens the door for healing. And before you know it, you've got a community that looks out for each other instead of tearing each other down. That's not pie-in-the-sky thinking. That's history. That's how we survived wars, depressions, and disasters. And that's how we'll survive whatever comes next. The warning signs. But let me give you a warning, sugar. If we keep going down this road of isolation, outrage, and indifference, we're in trouble. Big trouble. Because empathy isn't just about feelings. It's about action. It's about building systems that care. Schools that teach kindness. Workplaces that value fairness. Communities that reward compassion instead of cutthroat competition. Without that, we're just spinning our wheels. And don't think technology's gonna save us. It can help, sure, but empathy isn't an app you download. It's a habit you build. It's a choice you make every single day. And if we don't start making that choice, honey, we're gonna wake up one day and wonder why the world feels so cold. Foreshadowing the fix. So what's the fix? Well, sugar, that's what we're gonna dig into next. 5 practical steps to bring empathy back from the brink. And let me tell you, they're not complicated. They don't cost a dime. But they will cost you something. Your time, your attention, and maybe a little pride. Because empathy means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And if you're too busy polishing your own, that's gonna be a challenge. But don't you worry. Aunt Betty's got your back. We're gonna break it down, nice and easy. And by the time we're done, you'll have tools you can use today. Not next week. Not next year. Today. Because sugar, the world can't wait. Well, sugar, here we are, the home stretch of this opening conversation. And if you've stayed with me this long, bless your heart, because you're proving something important. You care. And caring, my precious children, is the first step toward empathy. But before we wrap up this segment, let's dig a little deeper into why this matters. Not just for you, but for every soul walking this earth. Empathy and resilience, two peas in a pod. Empathy isn't just about being nice. It's about survival. Communities that care for each other bounce back faster from disasters. They rebuild stronger. They heal quicker. Why? Because empathy fuels cooperation. And cooperation, sugar, is the secret sauce of resilience. You can stockpile beans and batteries all you want, but if you can't lean on your neighbor, or if your neighbor can't lean on you, your chances of thriving drop faster than a lead balloon. Think about the times you've seen people pull together. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires. When the chips are down, empathy shows up with muddy boots and rolled up sleeves. It's not glamorous. It's not trending. But it's real. And it saves lives. The empathy economy. Now, let me throw you a curveball. Empathy isn't just good for your soul, it's good for business. Companies that treat people with dignity, that listen, that care, they do better. Employees stick around. Customers stay loyal. Communities support them. Why? Because empathy builds trust. And trust, sugar, is worth more than gold in this world. But here's the rub, too many folks think empathy is weakness. They think it slows you down. Honey, that's nonsense. Empathy isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing that when you lift others, you rise too. And if you don't believe me, just look at history. The strongest societies weren't the ones hoarding resources, they were the ones sharing them. Empathy across generations. Let me tell you something about passing the torch. If we don't teach empathy to our kids, we're setting them up for a cold, hard world. And sugar, that breaks my heart. Because empathy isn't inherited, it's learned. It's modeled. It's practiced. So if you want your children to grow up kind, you've got to show them what kindness looks like. Not just in words, but in deeds. Hold the door for someone. Check on your elderly neighbor. Listen, really listen, when someone's hurting. Those little acts, they stick. They shape hearts. And those hearts shape the future. The hard truth. Now, I'm gonna say something that might sting. Empathy takes courage. It's easy to care about people who look like you, think like you, live like you. But real empathy? That means stepping outside your comfort zone. It means caring for folks who challenge you, who frustrate you, who maybe even scare you a little. And sugar, that's where the magic happens. Because when you bridge those gaps, you don't just change someone else's life, you change your own. Aunt Betty's final word for segment 1. So here's my bottom line, empathy isn't optional. It's essential. For families. For communities. For nations. Without it, we're just a bunch of islands drifting apart. With it, we're a force to be reckoned with. And honey, the world needs that force right now. Stick with me, because in the next segment, we're rolling up our sleeves and getting practical. 5 steps to build empathy like a pro. No fluff, no kumbaya circles. Just real, actionable advice you can use today. Because talk is cheap, sugar. Action is priceless. Now take a deep breath, pour yourself another cup of tea, and get ready. Aunt Betty's about to turn theory into practice. Well, sugar, now that we've dusted off the attic and talked about what empathy is, let's roll up our sleeves and dig into why it matters. And let me tell you, this isn't just a feel-good topic for Sunday brunch. This is life or death for communities. This is the difference between thriving and barely scraping by. Empathy is the backbone of civilization. Without it, we're just a bunch of individuals chasing our own tails. And honey, that's exactly what's happening out there. Folks are so wrapped up in their own worlds, they can't see past the end of their noses. And when you can't see others, you can't care for them. And when you can't care for them, society starts to crack like old paint on a porch swing. The stakes are high. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a neighborhood where nobody cares about anybody else. Your car breaks down? Tough luck. Your kid gets sick? Hope you've got good insurance. Your house floods? Well, sugar, better start swimming. That's what happens when empathy dies. And don't think it's just about being nice. It's about survival. Because when disaster hits, and it will, your fancy gadgets and your bank account won't save you. People will. History proves it. Communities that pull together survive. Communities that don't? They crumble. And honey, we're seeing cracks already. Loneliness is through the roof. Mental health is in the basement. Folks are angry, isolated, and scared. And fear, sugar, is the enemy of empathy. The outrage economy. Now, let's talk about this outrage business. Lord have mercy, if outrage were oil, we'd be energy independent. Social media has turned anger into a commodity. The madder you are, the more clicks you give. And the more clicks you give, the more money somebody makes. So what do? They feed you drama like it's dessert. And empathy? It starves. People aren't listening anymore. They're shouting. They're typing in all caps. They're blocking and unfriending like it's a sport. And sugar, you can't build bridges when you're too busy burning them. Empathy and power. Here's another hard truth. Empathy gets harder the more power you have. Folks at the top often forget what it feels like to struggle. And when you forget, you stop caring. That's why we need systems that bake empathy into the cake. Schools that teach kindness, workplaces that reward fairness, communities that value compassion over competition. Because if we leave empathy up to chance, it'll get trampled in the stampede for success. Global consequences. And don't think this is just a neighborhood problem. Lack of empathy is shaking the whole world. Wars, poverty, climate disasters. They all get worse when people stop caring about anyone but themselves. Empathy isn't just a personal virtue, it's a global necessity. Without it, we're headed for a future colder than a banker's handshake. Well, sugar, let's keep this train rolling because we've got a lot to cover. Now, earlier I told you empathy is the backbone of civilization. And I meant it. Without empathy, we're just a bunch of folks living in silos, hoarding our stuff, and glaring at each other over the fence. And honey, that's not living, that's surviving. Barely. The domino effect of losing empathy. Here's the thing about empathy. When it goes missing, everything else starts to fall apart. Families fracture. Communities weaken. Nations stumble. It's like pulling a thread from a quilt. Keep tugging and pretty soon, the whole thing unravels. And sugar, we're tugging hard these days. Look around. Loneliness is at an all-time high. People are drowning in anxiety. Depression's spreading faster than gossip at a church picnic. And why? Because we've forgotten how to connect. We've traded real conversations for emojis. We've swapped compassion for convenience. And honey, that's a bad bargain. The myth of self-sufficiency. Now, I know some folks out there are thinking, I don't need anybody. I'm self-sufficient. Well, bless your heart, but let me tell you something. Nobody makes it alone. Not in a storm. Not in a crisis. Not in life. Even the toughest homesteader needs a neighbor now and then. Because when the power goes out and the roads are flooded, it's not your Instagram followers who are going to pull you out, it's the person next door. Self-sufficiency is a fine goal, sugar, but don't confuse it with isolation. You can be independent and still care about others. In fact, that's the sweet spot, strong individuals in strong communities. That's how you build resilience. Empathy and preparedness. Let's talk preparedness for a minute, because you know Aunt Betty loves her preparedness. Stocking up on beans and batteries is smart. But if you're hoarding like a dragon on a treasure pile while your neighbor's kids go hungry, you've missed the point. Preparedness isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting each other. Because when communities pull together, everybody makes it through. When they don't, well, sugar, that's when chaos comes knocking. The cultural shift. Now, here's where it gets tricky. We're living in a culture that glorifies individualism. Look out for number one. Do you? Honey, that sounds cute on a coffee mug, but it's poison for a society. Because when everybody's looking out for themselves, nobody's looking out for each other. And empathy? It gets shoved to the back burner like last week's leftovers. And don't even get me started on this hustle culture. Lord have mercy, folks are working themselves to the bone chasing success, and in the process, they're forgetting what matters. You can climb every ladder in sight, but if you step on people all the way up, sugar, you're gonna find yourself mighty lonely at the top. Real-world consequences. Let me give you an example. Remember Hurricane Katrina? Thousands stranded, desperate for help. And what happened? Communities that pulled together survived. Communities that didn't? They suffered longer. Empathy wasn't just a nice idea, it was the difference between life and death. Same thing during the pandemic. Folks who checked on their neighbors, shared supplies, offered support, they made it through with less damage. But the ones who hoarded, who shut their doors and said, "Not my problem," honey, they didn't just hurt others, they hurt themselves. Because isolation breeds fear, and fear eats away at the soul. The empathy gap. Here's the kicker, empathy isn't evenly distributed. Some folks have plenty, others, not so much. And the gap is growing. Technology, politics, economics, they're all widening the divide. And if we don't start closing that gap, sugar, we're headed for trouble. Big trouble. Foreshadowing the fix. So what do we do? Well, that's coming up in segment 3. 5 practical steps to build empathy like a pro. And trust me, they're not complicated. You don't need a guru. You don't need a retreat in the mountains. You just need a willing heart and a little grit. Because empathy isn't about grand gestures. It's about small, consistent acts that say, "I see you. I care." But before we get there, we've got more ground to cover. Because understanding the problem is half the battle. And sugar, this battle is worth fighting. Well, sugar, if you're still with me, bless your heart, you've got stamina. And that's good, because this part's gonna dig deep. We've talked about the cracks in the foundation, but now we're gonna look at the termites eating away at the beams. And honey, those termites have names: indifference, isolation, and good old-fashioned selfishness. The isolation epidemic. Let's start with isolation. Lord have mercy, we've never been more connected and yet more alone. Folks have 1,000 friends online but can't find one person to help them move a couch. We've traded porch swings for news feeds, and sugar, that's a downgrade. Because empathy doesn't grow in isolation, it grows in connection. It needs eye contact, tone of voice, shared space. And when you take those away, empathy shrivels like a plant in the desert. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying technology is evil. It's a tool. But honey, a hammer can build a house or break a window. It's all in how you use it. And right now, we're using it to build walls instead of bridges. The selfie syndrome. Here's another termite, the cult of self. Everywhere you look, it's me, me, me. Self-care, self-love, self-branding. Now, don't misunderstand me. Taking care of yourself is important. But when self-care turns into self-obsession, empathy takes a back seat. Because you can't see someone else's pain when you're too busy admiring your own reflection. And sugar, this isn't just about individuals. It's baked into the culture. Advertisers tell you you're the center of the universe. Influencers sell you a lifestyle that screams, "It's all about you." And honey, that's a lie. Life isn't all about you. It's about us. And until we start acting like it, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels. The price we pay. Now, let me get real blunt, because you know Aunt Betty doesn't sugarcoat. When empathy dies, society pays. Crime goes up. Trust goes down. Mental health tanks. And don't think you're safe just because you've got a fancy alarm system and a freezer full of steaks. When communities crumble, everybody pays. You can't build a fortress high enough to keep out the consequences of indifference. And here's the kicker, empathy isn't just about feelings. It's about action. It's about systems that care, schools that teach kindness, workplaces that reward fairness, communities that value compassion over competition. Without that, we're just spinning our wheels. Stories that hit home. Let me tell you about a time that proved this point. Back in '93, a tornado ripped through a town not far from here. Houses flattened, power out for weeks. Folks had nothing, no food, no water, no shelter. And you know what saved them? Empathy. Neighbors sharing generators. Churches opening their doors. Strangers showing up with blankets and hot meals. Nobody asked for credentials. Nobody cared about politics. They cared about survival. They cared about each other. Now imagine if they hadn't. Imagine if everyone had said, "Not my problem." Honey, that town would have been a ghost town. That's the power of empathy. It turns chaos into community. The global picture. And don't think this is just a local issue. Lack of empathy is shaking the whole world. Wars, poverty, climate disasters. They all get worse when people stop caring about anyone but themselves. Empathy isn't just a personal virtue, it's a global necessity. Without it, we're headed for a future colder than a banker's handshake. Foreshadowing the fix. So what's the fix? Well, sugar, that's coming up in segment 3. 5 practical steps to bring empathy back from the brink. And let me tell you, they're not complicated. You don't need a guru. You don't need a retreat in the mountains. You just need a willing heart and a little grit. Because empathy isn't about grand gestures. It's about small, consistent acts that say, "I see you. I care." But before we get there, we've got one more piece of this puzzle to lay out. Because understanding the problem is half the battle. And sugar, this battle is worth fighting. Well, sugar, here we are, the last leg of this discussion, and I'm not letting you off easy. We've talked about the cracks in the foundation, the termites chewing at the beams, and the storms that'll knock the whole house down if we don't start caring about each other. Now let's bring it home. Empathy and everyday life. Empathy isn't just for big disasters or global crises. It's for the little moments that make up life. It's for the cashier who looks tired and needs a smile. It's for the neighbor who's been quiet lately and might need a check-in. It's for the friend who says, "I'm fine," but you know they're not. Those small acts? They matter. They add up. They build a culture where people feel seen, heard, and valued. And sugar, don't underestimate the power of those moments. They can turn someone's day around. They can keep someone from giving up. They can remind someone that the world isn't all sharp edges and cold shoulders. The empathy dividend. Here's something folks don't talk about enough. Empathy pays dividends. It makes families stronger. It makes workplaces better. It makes communities safer. When people feel cared for, they give back. They work harder. They trust more. They stick around. That's not just good for the soul, it's good for business, good for neighborhoods, good for the whole darn country. But when empathy dries up, everything gets harder. Relationships crumble. Productivity tanks. Crime rises. And honey, you can't legislate your way out of that. You can't buy your way out of that. The only way out is through, and that means rebuilding empathy from the ground up. The courage to care. Now, I'm gonna say something that might ruffle feathers. Empathy takes guts. It's easy to care about people who look like you, think like you, live like you. But real empathy? That means stepping outside your bubble. It means caring for folks who challenge you, who frustrate you, who maybe even scare you a little. And sugar, that's where the magic happens. Because when you bridge those gaps, you don't just change someone else's life, you change your own. And let me tell you, the world needs that kind of courage right now. We've got enough fear. We've got enough anger. What we don't have is enough people willing to say, "I may not agree with you, but I still care about you." That's the kind of thinking that keeps the lights on in civilization. The call to action. So here's my challenge to you. Don't wait for a disaster to start practicing empathy. Don't wait for a crisis to start caring. Start now. Start small. Start where you are. Because sugar, the world can't wait. And if we don't turn this ship around, we're gonna hit the rocks. Now, I've talked your ear off about why empathy matters and what happens when we lose it. But talk is cheap, honey. Action is priceless. So in the next segment, we're rolling up our sleeves and getting practical. 5 steps to build empathy like a pro. No fluff, no kumbaya circles. Just real, actionable advice you can use today. Because Aunt Betty doesn't just talk, she delivers. So pour yourself another cup of tea, take a deep breath, and get ready. We're about to turn theory into practice. And sugar, it's gonna change everything. Well, sugar, we've talked about what empathy is and why it matters. We've chewed on the hard truths, and now it's time to roll up our sleeves and get practical. Because talk is cheap, honey. Action? That's where the rubber meets the road. And Aunt Betty doesn't just talk, she delivers. Now, let me tell you something right off the bat. Building empathy isn't rocket science. You don't need a PhD. You don't need a meditation retreat in the Himalayas. You just need a willing heart, a little grit, and a dash of humility. And sugar, if you've got those, you're halfway there. Step 1. Listen like you mean it. First up, listening. And I mean real listening, not that half-baked version where you're nodding while scrolling through your phone. Put the phone down, sugar. Look people in the eye. Hear their words. Feel their tone. Because empathy starts with understanding, and understanding starts with listening. Now, here's the kicker. Listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about catching what's underneath. The sigh between sentences. The pause before the truth. That's where empathy lives. And honey, if you're too busy planning your comeback, you're gonna miss it. Step 2. Step outside your bubble. Next, get out of your comfort zone. Lord have mercy, if you only hang out with folks who look like you, think like you, and vote like you, you're living in a bubble. And bubbles are for baths, not for life. Empathy means crossing lines, cultural, political, social. It means saying, I may not agree with you, but I still care about you. And sugar, that takes guts. Start small. Talk to someone new. Read a book by an author from a different background. Watch a documentary that challenges your perspective. It's not about changing your beliefs, it's about expanding your understanding. Step 3. Practice microkindness. Here's a secret. Empathy isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in tiny acts of kindness. Hold the door. Say thank you. Compliment someone's effort. Check on your neighbor. These little things, they add up. They create a culture where people feel seen, heard, and valued. And sugar, that's the soil where empathy grows. Step 4. Tune out the noise. Now, this one's tough. Turn down the volume on outrage. Social media thrives on drama, and drama kills empathy. If you're spending hours arguing with strangers online, you're not building bridges, you're burning them. So take a break. Step outside. Breathe. Talk to a real person. Because empathy doesn't grow in comment sections, it grows in conversations. Step 5. Build empathy systems. And finally, don't just practice empathy, promote it. In your family, in your workplace, in your community. Create spaces where kindness is rewarded, where listening is valued, where compassion is the norm. Because sugar, empathy isn't just an individual habit, it's a cultural shift. And if we don't start making that shift, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels. Well, sugar, now that we've laid out the 5 steps, let's dig deeper into how you actually make them stick. Because knowing what to do and doing it? 2 very different things. And Aunt Betty's not here to hand out theory like candy at Halloween. I'm here to make sure you walk out of this attic ready to put empathy into action. Step 1 expanded. Listening like you mean it. Listening sounds simple, doesn't it? But honey, it's harder than threading a needle in the dark. Most folks think they're good listeners, but what they're really doing is waiting for their turn to talk. That's not listening. That's rehearsing. Real listening means shutting down that little voice in your head that says, "What's my comeback?" and tuning in to the person in front of you. Here's a trick. When someone's talking, don't just hear the words, hear the feelings. If your friend says, "I'm fine," but their voice cracks like old vinyl, sugar, they're not fine. Empathy means catching that crack and saying, "You sound tired. Want to talk?" That's how you turn words into connection. Step 2 expanded, stepping outside your bubble. Now, this one's gonna pinch a little. Because stepping outside your bubble means getting uncomfortable. And Lord knows we love our comfort zones. They're cozy, like grandma's quilt. But sugar, nothing grows in a bubble except ignorance. So pop it. Start small. If you always eat lunch with the same folks, invite someone new. If you only read books by authors who look like you, pick one from a different culture. And if you're brave, strike up a conversation with someone whose yard sign makes your blood pressure rise. You don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Because empathy isn't about changing your mind, it's about opening your heart. Step 3 expanded, microkindness in action. Microkindness is my favorite because it's easy and it works. Hold the door. Say thank you like you mean it. Compliment someone's effort, not just their looks. And sugar, don't underestimate the power of a smile. It costs nothing, but it can pay dividends. Here's a story. I once smiled at a cashier who looked like she'd been through the ringer. She lit up like a Christmas tree and said, "Thank you. You're the first person to smile at me today." Honey, that broke my heart, and it reminded me how hungry people are for kindness. So sprinkle it everywhere. It's like fertilizer for empathy. Step 4 expanded, tuning out the noise. Lord have mercy, this one's tough. Because drama is addictive. Outrage is like sugar. It gives you a rush, then leaves you crashing. And social media? It's a buffet of outrage. So here's my advice. Step away from the screen. Take a walk. Call a friend. Bake a pie. Do something that reminds you the world is bigger than your newsfeed. And if you can't quit cold turkey, set limits. 10 minutes of scrolling instead of an hour. Skip the comment section. It's a swamp, sugar, and you don't need to wade in. Because empathy doesn't grow in mud, it grows in sunlight. Step 5 expanded, building empathy systems. This one's the big picture. Because empathy isn't just an individual habit, it's a cultural shift. And sugar, culture starts at home. Make kindness a family rule. Reward listening. Teach your kids that caring isn't weakness, it's strength. And if you're in a workplace, push for policies that value people over profits. Because when empathy becomes the norm, everything gets better. Morale, productivity, trust. It's not just good, it's smart. Real-life scenarios. Let's make this real. Imagine you're in line at the grocery store. The person ahead of you is fumbling with coupons, slowing things down. You've got two choices, roll your eyes and huff like a steam engine, or smile and say, "Take your time." That's empathy in action. And sugar, it costs you nothing. Or picture this, your neighbor's lawn looks like a jungle because they've been sick. Instead of gossiping, grab your mower and help out. That's empathy. And it's contagious. Because when people see kindness, they want to pay it forward. Well, sugar, now that we've talked about listening, stepping outside your bubble, and sprinkling kindness like powdered sugar on a hot biscuit, let's take this up a notch. Because empathy isn't just something you practice in passing. It's something you weave into the fabric of your life. And honey, that means bringing it home, making it part of your family, and spreading it through your community like sunshine on a cold day. Empathy starts at home. Let me tell you something, if you want a kinder world, start with your own kitchen table. Because empathy begins where you live. It's in how you talk to your kids, how you treat your spouse, how you handle those little everyday frustrations. If you're barking orders like a drill sergeant and scrolling through your phone while your child's telling you about their day, sugar, you're teaching them that feelings don't matter. And that lesson? It sticks. So here's what you do, make listening a family rule. When someone talks, you stop and pay attention. No screens, no distractions, just ears and heart wide open. And if you want to go the extra mile, start a family tradition, highs and lows. Every night at dinner, everyone shares one good thing and one hard thing from their day. It's simple, but it teaches kids to express feelings and care about each other's experiences. That's empathy training, sugar, and it doesn't cost a dime. Teach empathy through action. Words are fine, but actions? They're the real teachers. If you want your kids to grow up kind, show them what kindness looks like. Hold the door for someone. Help a neighbor. Say thank you like you mean it. And when you do, tell your kids why. We help because it's the right thing. We care because people matter. Those little explanations, they plant seeds. And honey, those seeds grow into strong, compassionate hearts. Community exercises that work. Now, let's zoom out to the neighborhood. Because empathy doesn't stop at your front door, it spills into the street. And sugar, we need more of that spillover. So here are a few ideas. Neighborhood check-ins. Once a month, knock on a door you've never knocked on before. Say hello. Ask how they're doing. You'd be surprised how many folks are starving for connection. Skill swaps. Got a talent? Share it. Maybe you bake like a pro or fix leaky faucets. Offer to teach a neighbor. And encourage them to teach you something in return. That's empathy in action, giving and receiving without keeping score. Community kindness wall. Find a public spot, a library, a coffee shop, and set up a board where people can post needs and offers. Need a ride to the doctor? Offering free tutoring. It's simple, but it turns strangers into allies. Empathy and crisis preparedness. Now, you know Aunt Betty loves her preparedness, so let's talk about how empathy fits into that. Because sugar, when disaster strikes, empathy becomes a lifeline. Make a plan that includes your neighbors. Who's elderly? Who's got little ones? Who might need extra help? Write it down. Share phone numbers. Because when the lights go out and the roads flood, you're gonna need each other. And honey, that's not weakness, that's wisdom. The ripple effect. Here's the beautiful thing about empathy. It spreads. Like ripples in a pond. One act of kindness inspires another. One listening ear opens the door for healing. And before you know it, you've got a community that looks out for each other instead of tearing each other down. That's not pie-in-the-sky thinking. That's history. That's how we survived wars, depressions, and disasters. And that's how we'll survive whatever comes next. Foreshadowing the wrap-up. So sugar, we're almost done with this segment, but don't you wander off yet. Because next, we're gonna talk about how to keep empathy alive when life gets hard, when you're tired, stressed, and tempted to throw in the towel. Because let me tell you, that's when empathy matters most. Well sugar, here we are, the last stretch of this segment, and I'm about to give you the secret sauce for keeping empathy alive when life gets messy. Because let me tell you, it's easy to be kind when the sun's shining and your pantry's full. But when the bills pile up, the car breaks down, and your patience is thinner than a dime, that's when empathy gets tested. And honey, that's when it matters most. Empathy under pressure. Stress is like rust. It eats away at empathy if you let it. When you're tired, overwhelmed, and running on fumes, caring about someone else feels like climbing a mountain in flip-flops. But sugar, here's the truth. Empathy isn't about convenience. It's about commitment. It's about choosing to care even when it's hard. So how do you do that? You build habits that hold up under pressure. You make empathy automatic, like brushing your teeth. Because when the storm hits, you won't have time to think, you'll just act. And those actions, they'll save lives. Empathy boosters for hard times. Here are a few tricks to keep your empathy tank full when life's running on empty. Pause before you react. When someone snaps at you, don't snap back like a mousetrap. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what's behind this? 9 times out of 10, it's stress, not spite. Practice gratitude. Sounds simple, but it works. When you focus on what you have instead of what you lack, your heart opens up. And an open heart makes room for others. Limit the noise. When life's loud, empathy gets drowned out. So turn off the TV, step away from the doom scrolling, and give your brain a break. Silence is fertile ground for compassion. Anchor yourself. Find a mantra, sugar. Something like, kindness first, or people matter. Repeat it when you're tempted to lose your cool. It's like a compass when the fog rolls in. Empathy and resilience go hand in hand. Here's the kicker. empathy doesn't just help others, it helps you. Studies show that people who practice empathy bounce back faster from stress. Why? Because connection is a buffer. When you care for others, you build a support network. And when you've got a network, you're not facing life alone. That's resilience, sugar, and it's worth its weight in gold. Empathy as a legacy. Now, let's talk about the big picture. Empathy isn't just for today, it's for tomorrow. It's the legacy you leave behind. When you teach your kids to care, when you model kindness in your community, you're planting seeds that'll grow long after you're gone. And honey, that's how you change the world, not with speeches but with actions. Aunt Betty's final word for segment 3. So here's my bottom line, empathy isn't a trend. It's a lifeline. And if we want a world that's safe, strong and sane, we've got to make empathy a habit. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Because sugar, the storms are coming, and empathy is the umbrella that keeps us dry. Stick with me, because in the next segment, we're tying it all together. A recap, a call to action, and Aunt Betty's signature send-off. And honey, you don't want to miss it. Well sugar, here we are at the end of this journey, and I've got to tell you, I'm proud of you. You've stuck with me through the attic dust, the hard truths, and the practical steps. And now it's time to tie it all together. Because empathy isn't just something we talk about, it's something we live. Every day. In every choice. Looking back, what we've learned. We started this conversation by asking a simple question, what is empathy? And honey, we found out it's not pity, it's not weakness, it's strength. It's the backbone of resilience. It's the glue that holds families, communities, and nations together. Without it, we're just a bunch of islands drifting apart. With it, we're a force to be reckoned with. We talked about why empathy matters, how it turns chaos into community, fear into hope, strangers into allies. We dug into the termites eating away at our social beams. Isolation, outrage, selfishness. And sugar, we didn't stop there. We rolled up our sleeves and got practical. 5 steps to build empathy like a pro. Listening. Stepping outside your bubble. Micro-kindness. Tuning out the noise. Building systems that care. Simple steps, but powerful ones. Why this matters now. Now, let me remind you why this isn't just a nice idea for Sunday brunch. The world is changing fast. Storms are coming, literal and figurative. And when they hit, it won't be your follower count or your bank balance that saves you. It'll be people, neighbors, friends, communities pulling together. And sugar, that starts with empathy. The heart of the matter. Empathy isn't about grand gestures. It's about small, consistent acts that say, I see you. I care. It's about listening when it's easier to scroll. Helping when it's easier to hide. Choosing kindness when the world is shouting for outrage. And honey, that's hard work, but it's holy work. Because every time you choose empathy, you're pushing back against the darkness. You're lighting a candle in a storm. Well sugar, now that we've looked back at what we've learned, let's talk about something that tugs at my heartstrings. Legacy. Because empathy isn't just about today. It's about tomorrow. It's about the kind of world we're leaving behind for those sweet babies and grandbabies who'll be sitting in their own attic someday, wondering how we handled the storms. Empathy as a legacy. Think about it, every choice you make ripples out. Every act of kindness, every moment of listening, every time you choose compassion over convenience, you're planting seeds. And those seeds, they grow into trees that give shade long after you're gone. That's legacy, sugar. And it's worth more than any inheritance you could leave in a bank account. I've seen it with my own eyes. Families that teach empathy raise kids who care. Communities that value kindness become havens of hope. And honey, that's not just good for the soul, it's good for survival. Because when the storms come, and they will, it's those roots of empathy that keep the tree standing. The ripple effect of caring. Here's the beautiful thing, empathy spreads. Like ripples in a pond. One act of kindness inspires another. One listening ear opens the door for healing. And before you know it, you've got a community that looks out for each other instead of tearing each other down. That's not pie-in-the-sky thinking. That's history. That's how we survived wars, depressions, and disasters. And that's how we'll survive whatever comes next. Why reflection matters. Now, Sugar, before we wrap this up, I want you to take a breath and think about your own life. Who showed you empathy when you needed it most? Who listened when the world felt loud? Who cared when you felt invisible? Those moments, they stick. They shape us. And they remind us that empathy isn't just a word, it's a lifeline. And here's the kicker, you can be that lifeline for someone else. You can be the reason they keep going. You can be the light in their storm. And honey, that's a power worth using. Let me lay it out plain, empathy isn't weakness. It's strength. It's courage. It's choosing to care when it's easier to look away. And Sugar, the world needs that kind of courage right now. We've got enough fear. We've got enough anger. What we don't have is enough people willing to say, I may not agree with you, but I still care about you. That's the kind of thinking that keeps the lights on in civilization. Well, Sugar, now that we've talked about legacy and the ripple effect, it's time to turn reflection into action. Because empathy isn't just something you think about, it's something you do. And honey, doing it every day is what makes the difference. The everyday practice of empathy. Empathy isn't a one-time event. It's not like baking a pie for the church social and calling it good. It's a daily choice. Every morning when you wake up, you've got two options. Look inward and stay in your bubble, or look outward and make someone's day a little brighter. And Sugar, that choice matters more than you know. Start small. Smile at the cashier. Wave at your neighbor. Ask someone how they're doing, and mean it. These little acts, they're like drops of water on dry soil. They bring life back. And honey, the world is thirsty. Empathy in the hard moments. Now, let's get real. It's easy to be kind when life's smooth sailing. But when the storms hit, when you're tired, stressed, and tempted to snap, that's when empathy matters most. That's when you dig deep and choose grace over grumbling. Because Sugar, those hard moments, they're the ones that define us. Here's a trick. When you feel your patience wearing thin, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what's behind this? 9 times out of 10, it's stress, not spite. And when you see that, empathy kicks in. You stop reacting and start responding. And honey, that's a game changer. The courage to care. Empathy takes courage. It's easy to care about folks who look like you, think like you, live like you. But real empathy? That means stepping outside your comfort zone. It means caring for people who challenge you, who frustrate you, who maybe even scare you a little. And Sugar, that's where the magic happens. Because when you bridge those gaps, you don't just change someone else's life, you change your own. Aunt Betty's call to action. So here's my challenge. Don't wait for a crisis to start practicing empathy. Don't wait for the world to fall apart before you start caring. Start now. Start small. Start where you are. Because Sugar, the world can't wait. And if we don't turn this ship around, we're gonna hit the rocks. Well, Sugar, here we are, the last few steps of this long walk together. And I've got to tell you, my heart is full. We've laughed a little, learned a lot, and hopefully, we've stirred something deep inside you. A spark that says, I can do this. I can make a difference. Because empathy isn't just a word we toss around like confetti. It's a way of life. And honey, it's the only way forward. The big recap. Let's take a moment to look back. We started in segment 1 by dusting off the attic and talking about what empathy really means. Not pity, not weakness, but strength. Then in segment 2, we dug into why it matters, why the world feels colder than a banker's handshake, and what's at stake if we don't turn this ship around. Segment 3? That was the meat and potatoes. 5 practical steps to build empathy like a pro. Listening. Stepping outside your bubble. Micro-kindness. Tuning out the noise. Building systems that care. Simple steps, but powerful ones. And now, here we are, tying it all together. Because sugar, knowledge without action is like a recipe without cooking. It doesn't feed anybody. The call to civic awareness. Empathy isn't just personal, it's civic. It's how we build communities that work. It's how we hold leaders accountable. It's how we make sure policies serve people, not power. And honey, that starts with us. With voting. With volunteering. With speaking up when something's wrong. Because politicians, they work for us, not the other way around. And if they forget that, sugar, it's our job to remind them. The power of one. Now, I know what you're thinking, Aunt Betty, I'm just one person. What can I do? Honey, let me tell you, one person can change everything. One act of kindness can ripple through a community. One voice can spark a movement. One heart can light up the dark. Don't you ever underestimate your power. Because sugar, the world doesn't change all at once, it changes one choice at a time. Aunt Betty's signature send-off. So here's my final word, be the light. Be the listener. Be the one who cares when it's easier to look away. Because empathy isn't just about making life better for others. It's about making life richer for yourself. And honey, that's a bargain worth taking. Now go out in the sunshine and have some fun. But remember this, growing old is natural, growing up is a choice. Come back soon to Aunt Betty's Attic for more interesting conversation. And if you don't watch it, you might just learn something. Bye now.